for kicking my wife out after she punched my mom in the face. Now, probably a lot of preliminary thoughts here. There's a lot of you who are probably very close, very protective with your mother, and your gut instinct right now is to say, like, well, don't even know what happened, but I'm already on his side. Others of you, you weren't that close to your mom anyway, so you're like, what did the mom do, you know? My situation went from bad to worse in a matter of a week, and I don't know where else to turn. I need to know if I was wrong. Possibly a validation thing, because life is dumb right now. So, like, right off the bat, this guy thinks that he's right still, because he's like, I don't even know why I'm posting. I guess I just need some validation. Spoiler alert, he does not get validated. My wife and I have been together for 8 years, and she just gave birth to our first and last baby 2 months ago. Up until my wife got pregnant, my mom loved her. I'm not sure what the is wrong with my mom or why the switch happened, but after my wife got pregnant, my mom started being very clingy to me and started avoiding my wife at all costs. She told everyone she wasn't excited about the pregnancy. I threatened to go no contact with her when my wife was about 7 months along, and after that she snapped out of it for the most part and stopped being so ignorant. The comments 100% stopped at least, though she was still being clingy to me. So far, I think it might be a little bit normal for a mom to start getting clingy to a child who's about to have her first grandchild. The hatred toward the wife, though, is absolutely not normal. It's also weird that the shittiness only started during the pregnancy. What a weird phenomenon. Now, a week ago, my mom, my sister's husband, and my sister's daughter, 12, came over for dinner. I prepared the meal. Before my wife could eat anything, our daughter got fussy, so my wife excused herself to go feed the baby and get her down to sleep. I thought I had prepared enough, but apparently not, because my niece was still starving. She's 5'5" and 190 pounds. She's a big girl. I haven't seen her in a year. She was not that size then, so I didn't exactly portion an extra 3 helpings for a child, so I guess that's on me. I apologized and I told her that I hadn't made any more and offered her crackers as I was putting my wife's portion in the fridge. So okay, he's at least got the wife's dish secure. So it would have been worse if part of this problem was that he let the niece eat all of the food, but so at least the food's secure. After that, I just went outside with my sister's husband to smoke a cigarette and shoot the breeze. Didn't think anything of it. But then, I hear yelling from the inside. When I walk in, my wife and my mom are screaming at each other. Apparently, my mom, who saw me put my wife's food away, took it out and gave my niece my wife's portion of food. As I was walking inside, I heard my mom say, "Looks like you can afford to skip a meal," and slapped my wife's stomach. Just as I'm getting ready to step inside, literally fast walking toward them, yelling enough, my wife whines back and punches my mother square in the face and drops her. The whole house went silent, outside of my mom crying and holding her face. I told everyone to get the out. Immediately, everyone leaves, and my wife just turns toward the counter and leans with her hands on the counter, face down, eyes closed. I look at my wife and say, "You too." She looks up at me and says, "Really?" She's crying at this point. I say a clipped, "Yup." She packs up her and the baby and leaves. I text her that night and say I just need space. I need to decompress and come to terms with what just happened. She doesn't respond. The next 5 days, I'm texting and calling and I get nothing. She shows up here 8 days later and hands me divorce paperwork and my baby and says, "Here, you have a bit to hang out with her while I pack. When I'm breastfeeding, we can work out a visitation schedule that is either at your place or my mother's until she will take a bottle." I told her that's not what I want. I don't want to separate. I just needed time to process her punching my mother in the face. Unfortunately, I could never, ever, ever imagine my mother-in-law ever doing something this heinous or disgusting. My mother-in-law is a beautiful soul and an amazing, beautiful woman. She would never do this. But best believe, I don't care if you are a family member, all right? I have definitely dropped family members for some heinous shit. And usually I don't need to handle it with violence, but you lay hands on me, now it's self-defense. All right? You lay hands on me first, you have to take a nap. I'm sorry. You're going out. Like, this dude is lucky that she just swung once, because she'd be in a rear naked. I'd be bow and arrowing that bitch into oblivion, if we're being honest. She said, you needing time to process gave me time to process the fact that I refused to be in this situation any longer. I defended myself. I initially felt bad and remorseful, but you making me leave when I needed you to make me see more clear, I'm done. I'm sorry for what I did, but there's no fixing this. She refused to speak to me at all the rest of the time that she was there. My house feels so empty and I don't know what to do. Am I the a-hole for asking her to leave after she punched my mom? I just needed some fucking space. Now, there's a couple edits that are important to read for clarity and may or may not change how you end up viewing the situation. I'm going to read this edit first. The reason why he had such a strong reaction and asked her to leave. He said, my dad was stupid abusive. I was beat. My sisters and brother were beat. My mom was put in the hospital multiple times. It took years for police to enforce restraining orders, and he finally died in 2013. Violence scares the shit out of me. I clam up and get anxious around violence of any kind now. My wife knows this. She too grew up with a violent dad, and she gets just as anxious and panicky around violence. Her punching my mom in the face triggered an anxious response, and I needed her gone in that moment. I needed it far away from me. I don't know why I didn't just leave. I could have, but in that moment, I just let my emotions and fear ruin the whole circus and told everyone to get out, her included. My mom did slap her first. I guess for some reason I was seeing my wife's punch as being worse than the slap. It wasn't a hard slap, but my wife did kind of wince looking back on it now. She was fine following, but my mom was bleeding, split her eyebrow open in good shape. For the record, I am team wife. My mom deserved it wholeheartedly, and I've blocked her completely from my life. I literally just needed time to process what happened. My wife has a lot of things. Violent is not one of them. So this came completely out of left field and would not have happened without her being provoked. After it all happened, my mom sent me a text saying, see, I told you she was crazy. That fat doesn't belong in our life. I'm willing to bet she purposefully tried setting my wife off. So no, I'm on my wife's side 100%. I truly just needed to process what happened, and my wife took it as me giving up on her, not defending her, and throwing out her and our baby, which did essentially happen because I knew she had to take the baby with her when I kicked her out. So this is interesting. So some of you guys are NTA, but I think a lot of you are YTA. This one was very hard for me, especially when I read the part about him kind of having basically a trauma response to seeing the fight. And like, what sucks about this is that I don't think that we would ever be able to recreate the situation in a gender swap way. Not in good faith anyway. Like, it's just, I really am trying to look at this through a lens of compassion for all parties. I think we all agree that the mom deserved to get punched in the face. If you don't agree with me on that, that's fine. But I personally believe that the minute that you lay hands on someone in a forceful, attacking way, or even if you make a verbal, believable threat of violence, say, for example, I'm going to kill you. Saying something like that or laying hands on someone is an immediate forfeiture of your life if you can't defend it to that person. Do any of you think that his marriage is salvageable? Because I think that he fucked up really bad. Putting myself in this position, if one of my husband's family members laid hands on me and then after I defended myself, I was put out of the house with my baby and left to figure it out, that's up there, honestly, with like cheating as far as some of the biggest betrayals I think I could ever imagine. However, the trauma response aspect gives me personally a lot more compassion to the situation. Not to where it completely justifies it. He clearly has to go back to therapy and start working on some things so that he can figure out why this is still preventing him from anything. Like, you still have to be able to defend and protect your significant other to a degree, but at the same time, I have the self reflection to look at that and say, I'm holding him to a certain standard that I would only hold a man to. A woman, we wouldn't hold her to this standard. We would say, well, that's a fair trauma response. She can't be around violence. Of course she was right to kick someone out, right? Like if we were to put this in the other shoe, let's say it's the wife kicking out her husband after he punched her dad in the face under similar circumstances. I don't think anyone would call the woman an a-hole at all. I think they would if she didn't include the fact that it was like a trauma response. I think that she would probably still have some people who are like, dude, your husband was defending himself. Like, get your husband back in the house. I think there'd be some people there, but I think overwhelmingly by the time she brought up like, well, I grew up around a lot of violence and like I freeze up. I can't deal with it. Like and this is where it kind of bothers me is that whole expectation of like, well, you're supposed to be a man. That's really unfair sometimes, right? I think that in both situations of either gender, you shouldn't kick out your partner if they're just defending themselves, especially when they've been put through the ringer from your parent. However, I personally think that they could still work it out.